The first year of retirement is the most financially dangerous year of the entire journey, not the last year, when savings might be running low. The first one. Most people have no idea this is true, and the ones who discover it usually find out the hard way. There is also a psychological shift that happens in year one that no financial plan accounts for, and that derails more retirement plans than any market crash ever has. That piece of the picture comes back around shortly. Here is what the data shows about year one. The sequence of returns is the most consequential financial risk in retirement, and the first 12 months are where it does the most damage. According to 2025 research from the Morningstar Center for Retirement and Policy Studies, retirees whose portfolios suffered losses in the first 5 years of retirement were significantly more likely to run out of money over a 30-year horizon than those who experienced better early returns, even when both groups had identical spending patterns. The reason is compounding in reverse. A portfolio being drawn down cannot recover from an early loss the same way a portfolio being built up can. When $500,000 falls to $350,000 in year one, the withdrawals continue, the portfolio has less to recover from, and the compounding engine that would have rebuilt it is now working on a smaller base. The math of that scenario rarely resolves in the retiree's favor. This is not a theoretical risk. The S&P 500 fell more than 20% in 2022. Anyone who retired in early 2022 and was drawing from their portfolio throughout that year experienced exactly this scenario in real time. The timing of retirement relative to market cycles is something no one can fully control. But the exposure to that timing risk can be managed, and most people do not manage it at all. The practical implication is this. Having a cash buffer of 1 to 2 years of living expenses in a low-risk account at the point of retirement, held separately from the investment portfolio, means that withdrawals during a market downturn can come from the cash buffer rather than the portfolio. The portfolio is left to recover. This one structural decision has a disproportionate impact on how long the money lasts, and it is one of the most consistently underused tools in retirement planning. It does not require additional savings. It requires a different allocation of existing savings, implemented before retirement begins rather than in response to a crisis after it starts. A complementary strategy is to structure the portfolio itself with different buckets for different time horizons. Short-term needs covered by the cash buffer. Medium-term needs covered by bonds and income-generating assets with lower volatility. Long-term growth needs covered by equities with a horizon long enough to absorb downturns. This bucket approach, while not perfect for every situation, reduces the probability that a market downturn in year one forces a withdrawal from the growth-oriented portion of the portfolio at its lowest value. The emotional benefit of having a clear structure is also real. Retirees who know exactly where their next 3 years of income are coming from are less likely to make reactive decisions in response to market volatility than those drawing from a single, undifferentiated pool of assets. Now the healthcare gap, which is the other financial shock that year, one delivers with surprising regularity. For anyone who retires before 65, the loss of employer health insurance creates an immediate cost that most people have not fully priced into their plan. According to Bolden data compiled in 2025, ACA Marketplace insurance for retirees aged 62 to 65 averaged between $800 and $1,200 a month. COBRA coverage, extending a former employer's plan, averaged between $700 and $1,500 a month for the same age group. For a couple, that is potentially $2,400 a month, or nearly $29,000 a year, just in premiums. For someone withdrawing at a sustainable rate from a $700,000 portfolio, that healthcare cost consumes roughly half of their annual withdrawal before anything else is paid for. The people who are most exposed to this are the ones who retired in the first flush of post-career freedom, underestimated the cost of bridging healthcare, and started drawing from their portfolio at a rate that felt manageable until the real bills arrived. Even for those who retire at exactly 65 and move directly onto Medicare, the coverage is not free. Medicare premiums, supplemental coverage, and out-of-pocket costs still represent a significant ongoing expense. Fidelity's 2024 estimate puts the total healthcare cost for a 65-year-old couple throughout retirement at over $315,000, excluding long-term care. A 43% incidence rate of long-term care costs among baby boomers, with an average cost of $242,373 according to Morningstar's 2025 report, adds a potential tail expense that most Year 1 plans do not account for at all. Year 1 is also where most retirees discover a spending pattern they did not anticipate. Retirement does not reduce spending in Year 1. It frequently increases it. The go-go years of early retirement, the term used in the research to describe the period of high activity and high spending in the first decade of retirement, tend to produce higher discretionary expenditure than the working years they replaced. Travel, home projects, experiences deferred for decades. None of this is wrong, but it is poorly modeled in most retirement plans, which tend to assume spending stays flat or declines from the point of retirement. Research consistently shows that retirement spending follows a curve rather than a straight line. Spending tends to be highest in the first decade when health is good and deferred plans get executed. It moderates in the middle years as activity levels naturally reduce, and it tends to spike again in the final years as healthcare and long-term care costs increase. Planning a retirement spending model that curves rather than flattens is more complex than using a single number, but it is far more accurate and far less likely to produce a late-stage shock. Now to the psychological shift that was flagged at the beginning. The first year of retirement brings an identity crisis for a significant portion of people, and that crisis has direct financial consequences. The structure that work provided, the daily rhythm, the social contact, the sense of purpose and progress disappears all at once. Research published in the American Journal of Public Health found that retirement increases the likelihood of clinical depression by around 40%, with the risk peaking in the first 2 years. Depression in retirement is not just a personal well-being problem. It affects financial decision-making in ways that are both predictable and preventable. People who are struggling psychologically in early retirement are more likely to make impulsive financial decisions, less likely to follow a withdrawal plan, and more likely to make large, unplanned purchases as a way of filling the void that structure used to occupy. They are more likely to make reactive investment decisions in response to market news, selling at the wrong moment and buying back too late. And they are more likely to underestimate how much of their spending is driven by emotional state rather than genuine need. A clear-eyed plan for how time will be structured in retirement, developed before retirement begins rather than improvised after it starts, is not a lifestyle consideration. It is a financial one. If this kind of honest look at Year 1 retirement risk is resonating, take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe. There is a great deal more of this coming, and it takes just a few seconds. The practical prescription for Year 1 is to plan for it as deliberately as for any financial event. Have a clear structure for how time will be used, not just how money will be managed. Have at least one form of regular committed engagement, whether work, volunteer, creative, or social. Have a cash buffer large enough to avoid portfolio withdrawals during a market downturn. Have a realistic healthcare cost estimate that covers the full gap to Medicare, including both premiums and out-of-pocket costs. And have a spending model that accounts for the increased discretionary activity of early retirement rather than assuming it will be lower than the working years. One more element belongs in that Year 1 plan that almost nobody includes: a defined review date. Setting a clear moment, 6 months in and 12 months in, to assess whether actual spending, portfolio performance, and psychological adjustment are tracking within the expected range creates an early warning system. Problems that are caught at 6 months can almost always be corrected. Problems that accumulate quietly for 3 years before anyone notices are far harder to reverse. The people who navigate year one well are not those for whom everything went according to plan. They are those who had a plan specific enough to notice when reality diverged from it. The sequence of decisions in year one sets the financial trajectory for years 2 through 30. A portfolio damaged in year one by a market downturn combined with an overestimated spending model does not easily recover. The mathematics of compounding in reverse are simply not forgiving enough to absorb that kind of early loss in a portfolio that is already being drawn down. The cash buffer, the conservative initial withdrawal rate, and the realistic spending model are not optional features for people who want their money to last. They are the foundation, and they are far easier to build before year one begins than to improvise after it has already started. Year one is not just the beginning of retirement. It is the period that sets the financial and psychological trajectory for everything that follows. The people who navigate it well are the ones who planned for it specifically, not the ones who assumed it would take care of itself. The cliff is real, but it is avoidable for people who see it coming before they step off the edge.